George Bellows was perpetually fascinated by his country. As the nation pushed its way to the center stage of the 20th century, Bellows chronicled America's pursuits and passions like no artist before or since. His vision was wide and deep. He painted New York's boxers
A lightning fast right to the body, but he won't stay down.
and the roaring crowds that cheered and jeered them. The massive construction projects that transformed Manhattan, and the scrappy street urchins who lived in its slums. The breathtaking beauty of Maine's coastline, and the hard-working men and women that kept America moving. In a career cut short by death at the age of 42, George Bellows left over 1,000 paintings, drawings, and prints, a daring and original record of America in the early 20th century.
I arose surrounded by Methodists and Republicans. On Sundays, I was allowed 2 freedoms only, to read and to draw.
George Bellows was born in Columbus, Ohio in 1882. A gifted athlete, he attended Ohio State University and played on the varsity basketball and baseball teams. Reputedly rejecting an offer to play professionally for the Cincinnati Reds, Bellows chose art instead. He continued to draw, publishing sketches of college life for student publications. In 1904, at the end of his junior year, he left the Buckeye State for New York. Bellows enrolled in the New York School of Art, founded by the painter William Merritt Chase. Influenced by the French Impressionists, Chase was a masterful handler of paint and an advocate of painting outdoors. Bellows' 1905 painting, May Day in Central Park, reflected his respect for the genteel subjects that attracted Chase. But the city was changing in ways overlooked by Chase and his generation of painters. Old New York was giving way to a seething metropolis. Then, as now, Manhattan was a city of extremes. Affluent New Yorkers largely ignored the working poor in the flood tide of immigrants rolling into the Lower East Side. Their hard-scrabble lives were documented in 1888 in photographs taken by Jacob Riis, a Danish immigrant. In the 1890s, Alfred Stieglitz was also photographing bleak scenes, turning slushy streets into works of art. Painting the less glamorous side of New York was Robert Henry's mission. 15 years younger than Chase, the charismatic Henry also taught at the New York School of Art. His approach was influenced by Edward Manet's resolve to paint the world around him. Henry exhorted his students, such as John Sloan, to paint unflinchingly the reality of what was in front of them, a rapidly changing city and its people. The gritty style was later dubbed the Ashcan School. Bellows joined Henry's class, which also included Edward Hopper, who became a lifelong friend. Henry's influence quickly began to show in Bellows' work. Bellows' portrayal of the plight of the urban poor began to take shape in Kids, a snapshot of the lives of children consigned to the city's shadows. An exposé titled Darkness and Daylight summarized for its readers the likely future for Bellows' kids.
Born in poverty and rags, nursed in filth and darkness, reared in ignorance and vice, matured in sin and crime, is the life history of tenement house creatures, and the end must be either the almshouse or the prison.
In River Rats, Bellows shocks some viewers by placing a gaggle of poor boys at play on the banks of a murky river. One critic found it
so sordid a theme that it proves afresh that the artist and not the subject makes the work.
In 1907, he staked out his territory with 4 major paintings. In his stark and candid Little Girl in White, Bellows paid homage to James McNeill Whistler in the conventions of formal portraiture, traditionally the preserve of upper-class sitters. But the sitter, Queenie Burnett, was a laundress who worked in Bellows' building. In his early portraits, Bellows showed a class of New Yorkers who were generally kept out of the picture. Bellows' interest in the world around him showed in the depiction of a makeshift beach on the East River. The working-class boys on a ramshackle dock in 42 Kids was a universe away from the seaside holidays favored by impressionists like Chase. At an exhibition in Philadelphia, 42 Kids was awarded a prize that was subsequently revoked. When Bellows was asked if the sponsors objected to the naked children, he replied, "No, it was the naked painting that they feared." New York's seemingly endless building boom intrigued Bellows. Pennsylvania excavation presents a gaping wound in the city's center as it gives way to the foundation of the future Penn Station. Club night guaranteed Bellows a place in the avant-garde. He honed in on the city's illicit boxing matches with the eye of a sports writer. Bellows' reputation as a painter with a powerfully masculine style and sensibility was emerging. He was one of the youngest artists ever elected to the National Academy of Design. Manhattan's skyscrapers were anchored in the deep bedrock that provides the city's backbone. Excavation and construction were big businesses in the new century. New department stores, Macy's and Saks, shot up in Herald Square in 1904. The citywide building boom came at a price. Headlines in the New York newspapers chronicled the human cost. Bellows painted New York's growing pains, zeroing in repeatedly on the Pennsylvania Railroad station. He conveyed the monumental scale of the project. From its inception, Penn Station was promoted and understood as the archetypal example of the making of a modern city. Frequently compared to the recently built Panama Canal, the venture delivered the long-awaited rail link between the financial and commercial powerhouse of New York City and the rest of the country. Begun in 1904, it transformed 2 blocks into an 8-acre void in the heart of Midtown. Construction continued until 1909, producing the neoclassical building that housed the city's largest indoor public space. A gigantic hole cut into the earth dominates the 1908 excavation at night. The recent past of the city was scraped clean, back to the earth and rock that underpinned it. Pennsylvania Station excavation followed in 1909. A critic noted that
Bellows has made a stark, harsh, ugly, and powerfully felt portrayal of the great gaping wound in the dirty earth. It is a picture to make rosewater idealism shiver and evaporate. But it is real. It is truthfully painted.
Bellows' main interest in Penn Station was as a work in progress. Blue Morning is the only painting in which the station is fully seen, but it's relegated to the background, almost lost in an atmospheric haze. Bellows painted more than 50 canvases of the city and the people who kept it humming in the 20 years he lived there. They reflect his understanding of life in the modern metropolis. In the lone tenement, a solitary apartment house is the last vestige of a neighborhood giving way to skyscrapers and bridges. It hangs on, as stubborn as the tenants in the foreground. For relief from the crowded city, New Yorkers turned to Coney Island. A 35-cent train fare from Manhattan, it offered cheap amusements, rides, and fun galore, as well as a relatively clean shoreline for swimmers of all ages. Bellows' 1908 depiction, Beach at Coney Island, captures its working-class subjects at rest, snatching a few hours of pleasure on the Brooklyn shore. The city's indoor entertainments were many, but the athletic Bellows was drawn to boxing. The fight game in the early years of the 20th century was brutal and often corrupt. New York State's legislature banned it, repealed the ban, and then banned it again. Manhattan promoters like former boxer Tom Sharkey, a friend of heavyweight champion Jack Johnson, found a loophole. In private athletic clubs, boxing matches between members were legal. By giving the fighters one-night memberships, the show could go on. Hence, the title of Bellows' 1909 painting, Both Members of This Club. In Stag at Sharkey's, the struggling fighters resemble slabs of meat. His 19th century predecessors, like Thomas Eakins, had couched boxers in a static classical style hailing back to ancient Roman sculpture. Bellows modernized the subject, homing in on the manic energy of the matches. His brushwork is as furious and rhythmic as the ferocious punches. The faces outside the ring are just as savage. Their expressions range from gloating pleasure in the violent clash to amazement, horror, and anguish.
I am not interested in the morality of prize fighting, but let me say that the atmosphere around the fighters is a lot more immoral than the fighters themselves.
The American fascination with the country's masculine and energetic spirit was reflected in Theodore Roosevelt's assertive presidency. One critic also noted that dynamic, almost combative quality in Bellows' paintings.
He slams on his color most indecorously with splendid effect. He shoots with both barrels of his gun, but he bags his game.
Like the Penn Station works, Bellows' paintings of the Hudson River in various seasons depict the forces of nature that girded and underlay the modern island city. Critics detected a new, rugged approach to landscape painting, praising Bellows' ability to attain truth of impression. Bellows was fascinated by the borderlands where nature gave way to the city. In Snow-Capped River, the park bench and the people walking their dogs are reminders that the city's workspaces and areas of outdoor recreation are never far apart. He used smoothly flowing brushstrokes for the snowy shoreline and short, choppy strokes for the broken ice on the river. In floating ice, his pigment is crustier and his use of the palette knife more pronounced. The city he'd chosen to live in changed almost daily. In a 1911 painting titled New York, Bellows caught Manhattan's strange mixture of excitement and chaos. Ostensibly Madison Square at the intersection of Broadway and 23rd, the painting is in fact a composite of views, a tangled mix of the old and new. Horse-drawn hay wagons and automobiles, electric signs, elevated railway tracks, and office buildings surround a population racing forward in a dozen directions. Bellows continued to paint new subjects, from Summer Night Riverside Drive to A Day in June, painted in 1913. It's the sort of scene William Merritt Chase might have created. Impeccably dressed couples and groups at leisure in Central Park. The luminous whites are set off by colorful details, a translucent green parasol, an orange coat, and fresh-cut flowers add to the impression of summer afternoon pleasures in the sun-drenched park. In 1910, Bellows married the artist Emma Louise Story, whom he had met when they were fellow students at the New York School of Art. He painted Emma in many different moods and styles. She was both his wife and his muse.
Can I tell you that your heart is in me and your portrait is in all my work? What can a man say to a woman who absorbs his whole life?
A year after their marriage, Emma gave birth to a daughter, Anne. A second girl, Jean, followed 4 years later. Fatherhood opened Bellows' eyes. His many portraits of Emma and their daughters reflected Bellows' growing interest in family life as a worthy subject. He would turn to his family, both immediate and extended, for inspiration throughout his life. But New York City and its people continued to intrigue him. In Splinter Beach and its reincarnation in oils, Riverfront No. 1, he depicted the poor pursuing the city's inexpensive pleasures. In Cliff Dwellers, Bellows tightened his focus on the flip side of progress, the city's urban poor consigned to tenements in a sweltering brick-bound jungle. Working men and women look on as kids play in a dusty street. One critic was moved to write,
It occurred to me that the thing held a quiver of emotion in it, a strong man's momentary heartthrob at the pathos of these poverty-stricken specimens. These broken, emaciated lives lived out in the terrible territories of the world.
The socialist magazine The Masses published a subsequent illustration. The editors retitled it, Why Don't They Go to the Country for Vacation? A politically motivated swipe at those who ignored New York's squalid side. Bellows' friends included socialists and anarchists, and he contributed prints and drawings to their publications. He also served on the editorial board of The Masses. But his idea of anarchy valued individual freedom, and most importantly, artistic freedom over political agendas. He joined the Association of American Painters and Sculptors and helped organize their International Exhibition of Modern Art in 1913. The Armory Show, as it came to be known, was a legendary watershed in American art. It brought together more than 1,000 works by European Impressionists, Post-Impressionists, Fauves, and Cubists, as well as important contemporary Americans. Bellows' submissions included the circus. He had never before had the opportunity to see the work of so many influential artists in one place. Works by Gauguin, Van Gogh, Matisse, and Kandinsky. Duchamp's nude descending a staircase shocked visitors. Bellows admired the show's spirit of artistic freedom and the experimentation evident in the new revolutionary work by the European avant-garde. But Cubism meant little to him, and he was not in sympathy with the European preoccupation with abstraction. He had a brand new world to paint.